Sometimes the story we hear as kids aren't just legends. They're lessons dressed in 10-gallon hats and tall boots. Hey everyone, welcome back to Movies on the Brain. I'm Jason, and today we're heading into the mythic world of the American frontier with Tall Tale, a 1995 adventure directed by Jeremiah S. Chechik, starring Patrick Swayze, Nick Stahl, Oliver Platt, Scott Glenn, Catherine O'Hara, and Jared Harris. This film blends frontier folklore with a coming of age story wrapped in light skies, big characters, and even bigger ideals. So hitch up your saddle and open your imagination because this one's got the spirit of a campfire story come to life. Let's get into it. Tall Tale opened in theaters on March 24th, 1995 with a budget estimated to be 23 or $32 million. The only numbers I can find are how much it made total. I'm unable to find out how long it was in theaters and its weekly sales, but throughout its entire theatrical run, it earned $8.2 million domestically and $2.8 million internationally, making a worldwide total of $11.04 million. In 1905, Daniel Hackett, a young farm boy from the western town of Paradise Valley, is unhappy with his life and dreams of life in New York City. His father Jonas likes to tell Daniel tall tales about Pecos Bill, Paul Bunyan, and John Henry, which Daniel has heard many times, leading him to doubt their existence. Meanwhile, Paradise Valley is being coveted by a greedy developer, J.P. Stiles. Stiles attempts to convince Jonas and the other farmers to sell their land to him, with Jonas's farm lying in the center of where he wants to develop. However, when Jonas refuses to hand up his deed, Stiles hunts him down and shoots him, but not before Jonas hands the deed off to Daniel for safekeeping. With Jonas in critical condition and unable to farm, his land is put at risk. Upset, Daniel runs out to hide in his father's boat and cries himself to sleep. The ropes holding the boat come undone, and Daniel drifts downstream. When Daniel awakes, he discovers that the boat has washed up in the deserts of Texas. After a brief encounter with some thieves, Daniel is rescued by legendary cowboy Pecos Bill. The duo later team up with lumberjack Paul Bunyan and strong African American ex-slave John Henry. Each of these heroes hooks up with Daniel. He even uses Babe, the blue ox, to free them after they were arrested for causing a bar fight by Pecos' ex-girlfriend Calamity Jane. Afterwards, the heroes soon become involved in an increasingly bitter and boisterous fight against Stiles' men as Stiles' plans to buy up land threaten the very strength of the folk heroes and the well-being of the common people. When Stiles catches up with Daniel, with his men having subdued Pecos, Paul, and John, he entices Daniel to give up the deed by filling him with doubts about the heroes. Daniel then sees a vision of the Paradise Valley inhabitants being forced to help with Stiles' development. Just then, Daniel wakes up in the boat, realizing it was just a dream, with the rope having not come undone. He ventures towards Stiles' train, who is about to head out into the lands. Daniel confronts Stiles, the railroad magnate, and Stiles' henchmen as they attempt to run him over until John Henry arrives and holds the train. Stiles orders his men to kill them, but Pecos arrives and shoots off their trigger fingers, and the townsfolk join in to help, while Paul, who went inside while nobody noticed, cuts down the mine poles. Daniel then finishes off the last pole, killing Stiles and his men in the resulting cave-in, and the crowd cheers for him. Daniel then returns to the farm and admits to his recuperated dad that the stories were true and their land is important. Paul, Babe, John, his mule Cold Molasses, and Pecos show up to say goodbye to Daniel. As Paul and John disappear with their animals, Pecos leaves his horse Widowmaker to Daniel and twirls his lasso at a twister for his departure as Jonas witnesses it. Now let's look at the cast and some of their other roles they've had. Scott Glenn as J.P. Stiles. Other roles for Scott Glenn include Bart Mancuso in The Hunt for Red October, John Adcox in Backdraft, and Dale in Greenland. Oliver Platt as Paul Bunyan. Other roles for Oliver Platt include Hector Sire in Lake Placid, Rupert Burns in Bicentennial Man, and Jimmy King in Ready to Rumble. Nick Stahl as Daniel Hackett. Other roles for Nick Stahl include Rourke Jr. in Sin City, Dylan in Dead Awake, and James in Sleepwalking. Stephen Lang as Jonas Hackett. Other roles for Stephen Lang include Bill Gore in The Featherweight, Fred Paris in VFW, and King in The Nut Job. Roger Aaron Brown as John Henry. Other roles for John Aaron Brown include Deputy Chief Joe Nolan in the TV show The District, Vic Sauter in Victory in Lane 2, and Whitaker in RoboCop 2. Jared Harris as Pug, the head thug. Other roles for Jared Harris include Mac McGrath in Mr. Deeds, Bernard in From Within, and Ulysses S. Grant in Lincoln. Catherine O'Hara as Calamity Jane. Other roles for Catherine O'Hara include Pinktail in The Wild Robot, Judith in Where the Wild Things Are, and Kate in Home Alone. Patrick Swayze as Pecos Bill. Before his passing in September of 2009, other roles for Patrick Swayze include Johnny Castle in Dirty Dancing, Bodie in 1991's Point Break, and Jack Cruz in Black Dog. Moira Harris as Sarah Hackett. Other roles for Moira Harris include Arlene in Breakdown, Betsy in Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, and Katherine Holman in Three Wishes. Joseph Grafasi as a man in a top hat. Other roles for Joseph Grafasi include Tommy Molto in Presumed Innocent, Judge Rand in the TV show Bull, and Riley in Money Train. John P. Ryan as Grub. For his passing in March of 2007, other roles for John P. Ryan include Rankin in Runaway Train, Red Bennett in Hoffa, and Jennings in Best of the Best. Scott Wilson as Zeb. For his passing in October of 2018, other roles for Scott Wilson included Captain Billy Cutshaw in The Ninth Configuration, Herschel Green in the TV show The Walking Dead, and Judd Travers in Shiloh. Burt Kramer as Bronson. Before his passing in June of 2001, other roles for Burt Kramer include the Fire Chief in Volcano, Martin Hayworth in Street Corner Justice, and Howard in Between Christmas and New Year's. You know, Nick Stahl is so young in this movie. If I wouldn't have done a dive into the cast's filmography, I don't think I'd have recognized him. I do like how we start off with Daniel just entranced by the horseless carriages, as he calls it. And I didn't recognize Stephen Lang in the slightest in this as Daniel's dad. I literally had to pause the movie and look it up on Google to make sure I heard the voice. The beard and the mustache threw me off. The facial expressions Nick Stahl gives when Jonas is telling the stories of Pecos Bill are great. They are something a boy his age would actually do if he'd heard the same story many times. Scott Glenn looks downright scary as J.P. Styles, and that voice makes him even scarier. The score when Jonas gives Daniel the deed to the farm when Styles and his thugs start looking for Jonas is so good. One thing that I like to know is how does Styles know Daniel was given the deed? I don't recall Styles knowing Daniel was at that meeting. If you know how Styles knows, please let me know in the comments. I love the introduction of Pecos Bill and the conversation between him and Daniel when you can only see their side profiles in the silhouette of the sun. Such a great editing choice. Honestly, I did not realize William H. Macy was in this too, and he's uncredited in it as well. Such a fun surprise seeing him. I like the chemistry between Patrick Swayze and Nick Stahl. It's so genuine. That first fight scene is so well shot, choreographed, especially for an early 90s movie. We almost got a preview of Final Destination 5, Final Destination 5 years prior to that franchise starting with the saw blade with the saw blade with Daniel stuck in the bracket holding the log. I love Oliver Platt as Paul Bunyan, even just from that first scene. I love Roger Aaron Brown's voice in this, and I think he's the perfect casting for John Henry, based on what I know about that folktale anyway. I'm actually surprised that one of our heroes that they had one of our heroes actually lose when John Henry faced the machine in the drilling competition. Catherine O'Hara is almost unrecognizable as Calamity Jane, and this was filmed just a few years after Beetlejuice, so it's crazy how much different she looks. I love the shot of Jane shooting off the end of Pecos Bill's cigar. It's actually such a neat visual. I honestly wouldn't have minded seeing a prequel about what happened with Calamity Jane and Pecos Bill in Amarillo. That chase scene of Styles and his men chasing Daniel through the city while Babe gets Paul, John, and Pecos out of jail is such a fun scene. The scene where John Henry and Daniel are talking about their fathers is probably the best scene in the film, and it's so short. I really wish it was longer. For being such a young actor at the time of this movie, Nick Stahl has such chemistry with everyone involved, especially Swayze, Platt, Brown, and even Scott Glenn to an extent. Interesting way to show us the entire second act was just a dream, but I honestly think it works for this film. That final monologue by Styles has to be one of the best short monologues in film. For it being so early on and for CGI, that final tornado that Pecos Bill wrangles up looks amazing. Overall, a nostalgic, fun movie with a great villain, great cast, and fun sets. Now let's look at some fun facts and trivia for this movie. Originally, Gary Sinise was cast as the father, Jonas Hackett, but left the cast to play Lieutenant Dan Taylor in Forrest Gump. Calamity Jane fires 40 shots from her pistols in the bar without reloading. Most depictions of Paul Bunyan make him a supernaturally tall giant, perhaps 10 to 15 feet tall. This version of Paul has an average man's height, but with a larger than life personality to compensate. In the bar, when drunks insult Texas in front of Pecos Bill, you can see a wanted dead or alive poster for Daniel Hackett on the outside wall, just as the drunk goes through the window. As CGI was still in its infancy when this movie was made, Babe the Ox was painted blue with non-toxic vegetable dye. To further ensure the animal wasn't harmed during filming, crew members pushed the wall of the jail from behind, giving the illusion of Babe dragging it down the street. This movie was filmed in 1993, but not released until March 1995. In the sawmill, Pecos Bill fires 30 shots at the saw without reloading his pistols. And that's a wrap on Tall Tale, a film that wears its heart on its sleeve and reminds us that legends live on not because they're real, but because of what they stand for. With its larger-than-life characters and old-school stints of adventure, is a story that speaks to courage, imagination, and the power of believing in something bigger than yourself. Thanks for watching Movies on the Brain. I'm Jason, and I'll see you next time, where the stories may not always be true, but they're always worth telling.